Okay, good evening everyone. Apologies, I'm 1 minute late. That's terrible, isn't it? I was all set up in my conservatory and it started raining and it is really, really loud, so you wouldn't have been able to hear me. Good evening everyone and welcome to the second of my live interview coaching group. Tonight is all about CVs. My name's Dawn and I'm the founder of Your Interview Coach. Welcome to my session. What's happened in the last 2 weeks, first of all? Well, I've had a lot of feedback, and really, really good feedback. And some feedback that I've taken on board for me to improve what I'm doing. I am going to start straight away, but I'm also going to be here every week, because people have said don't worry about waiting for people to come on and watch while you're live. We're actually catching up when it's convenient for us. So the recorded version is being uploaded onto Facebook, but it's also being uploaded to my YouTube channel. And people are getting a lot of value out of that because they can pause it, they can take notes, they can ask themselves the questions that I was asking last week. So all is good. You don't have to watch live, but if you want to have the opportunity to interact, then that's great, isn't it? Today we're going to be talking about CVs. Now, I've said that using a template is a good start. You can, hello to the viewer, and they've disappeared. Using a template is a really good start, but it's not enough to put together a really compelling, winning and powerful CV. But it's a good start. You can start there. So use a template, fill in the sections, and then what I'm going to share tonight will up the game. So I'm going to not go through the basics. Some of it is the basics, some of it is what I would call common sense, but I shouldn't assume that you don't know some of the things that recruiters look for. So what I'm going to do is break this into 6 sections. So here are the, well, before I make a start, let me just go over a few points. I don't claim to be an expert. I'm not an expert. However, I have viewed tens of thousands of CVs. I've interviewed nearly 10,000 candidates. So if I'm getting 10 to 500 CVs for every single vacancy, at the peak of my career, I was seeing a lot of CVs. Now, I'm going to be talking about best practice. And I would say I'm going to rule out one particular group of people, graphic designers. You have a whole different CV. This is the traditional corporate CV. This is the CV for people that want a career, not a job. So just to get that out of the way, graphic designers, they're a whole different. You're demonstrating your skills on paper. So you don't even use Word, do you? You use Visio or some sort of technical software to present your skills, and that's quite right. So this isn't for you. So I'm talking about a traditional CV, and if your CV was sent out to 20 different people, 20 different opinions would come back. So that's why I'm not claiming to be an expert, but I do know what looks good on paper. So let me break this down into 6 very easy sections. Some of these we're going to whiz through quite quickly, and others we're going to spend a bit more time. I've even decided to talk about one section next week because it's too huge to talk about today. So get your pens and papers ready, because we're going to go through there is going to be tips flying out as I talk you through these sections. So get your pens and paper ready. These are the 6 sections. 1, your contact details. Yeah, that's pretty obvious. And we won't be spending too much time on that, but there are a few bits that I want to talk to you about. Number 2, your personal profile. Some people call it a career summary. That's number 2, and there's a lot that goes into writing a personal profile. Number 3, your key skills and competencies. Again, probably some of the things I share about the personal profile will be relevant for writing out the key skills, and I'll talk about that. Number 4 is your career history, and I'm going to talk through 2 types of CV formats, the most common types, and how you would use them, and in what circumstances you would use them. And then number 5, I'm going to talk about education and qualification. Again, that's a section that we can whiz through quite quickly. Then number 6 can be 3 different things. And again, I'll talk through those in a little bit more detail. So 6 could be awards and recognition. It could be professional membership. Or it could be, if you have no work experience, it could be hobbies and interests. So that's the 6 sections I'm going to talk to you about today. Now, before I go into the detail, CVs have been around for decades, literally decades, and I'm as surprised as anyone that CVs are still going strong. But the majority of jobs or employees still want to see a CV. And even if you're applying internally, people will want to see a CV, or the recruiters, the HR department will still want the CV. So even if you're not looking at the moment, it's a good practice to have that CV together. Also, there's lots of advice out there for CVs, and they always say 2 pages. But when you're writing your CV from scratch, don't worry about 2 pages at that stage. What you want to do is capture all the information. And I have a couple of templates that I can hand out for you. My email is dawn@yourinterviewcoach.co.uk. So don't worry about 2 pages at the start. We're going to put a master CV together, and that means putting everything on there. Now, you wouldn't send out this master CV. This is just for you to capture everything we talked about last week. So the SWOT analysis, for example. And I think that we can start. We can make a start. So, okay, contact details. I said I'd really whiz over this quite quick, but there are some key points that I need to make. Obviously, you need to put your name on. Okay, that's obvious. If you hadn't done that, we really do need to talk. You need a professional email. Now, I can't stress that enough. Your future boss is going to be reading that email, and it's just not appropriate if you've got something funny, inappropriate. It's just not right on a work document, on a career document. So get a professional email. Now, if you are loading your CV up onto Monster, Read, Indeed, CV Library, I would take out the address. And if we talked about your commuting preferences, are you willing to commute? Are you willing to travel? Are you willing to relocate? I would actually take off the whole address. And it's sensible, and for security reason, I'll take off the whole address and just put the town and the county. But if you want to travel further afield, I'd take off all that. Just have your email, telephone number, and use a mobile number. Don't put your landline if you never ever answer it. Just put your mobile, because recruiters will first of all phone you. They'll then send a text, and the last resort, they'll send an email. Be ready to answer the phone. Be ready to answer the phone professionally. You're on the job market now. And make sure you change any voicemails. So that's all I'm going to say on contact details. Let's move on to personal profile now. Now, this should paint a picture of what you are like in the workplace. How would your boss describe you? How would your colleagues describe you? And use words you are very, very comfortable with. Use words that really describe you in the workplace. Don't use words because someone else used it, or you copied and pasted it from a book or a template that was already written out. It's got to paint a picture of you. If you're introvert, if you're professional, if you're dynamic, if you're extrovert, if you're analytical, you need to write it down. So, for example, I would say that I was professional and structured. I like to partner with the business, and I would describe myself now with the years of experience and knowledge and skills as a senior recruiter. But I wouldn't ever use words as like dynamic. I don't describe myself as dynamic. And remember, when someone reads your personal profile, when you turn up, they may question you on that. They may ask, okay, you said you're analytical, give me an example. And you'll be caught out if you're not analytical and you don't have any examples to share. So this personal profile should marry up to what you're like in the workplace. There's a few other tips that I want to share about personal profiles that people make a mistake about. Candidates make the mistake of stuffing loads of the softer skills into one sentence. So they'll say, I'm good at communication, I've got great interpersonal skills, I am planned and organised, and I meet deadlines, all in one sentence. And actually, that's too generic, it's too vague, and it doesn't really say much. So, first of all, only 2 competencies per sentence. Then you want to back up those competencies, and I'll give you an example in a minute. And you want to describe how you apply them. So, for example, if I said I was an excellent communicator, that doesn't really say a lot about how I communicate. Who do I communicate to? How do I communicate? And what am I communicating? So, communication is a really important skill in the workplace, but it's used very differently. If I worked in a contact centre, for example, my telephone manner, my investigation skills, my listening skills would be my communication skills. However, if I was training a group of senior managers, that communication would look very, very different. You might use your communication to influence or persuade, so you must back up every single competency. It's not enough to say, I've got great communication skills. It doesn't really tell the person how you've applied them, how you use those competencies, and who you're communicating to. Does that make sense? Good. Also, the competencies should marry up. You shouldn't put 2 conflicting competencies in the same sentence. So what I mean is, an example of that would be communication and presentation skills, because they both go together, or planning and organising and prioritising, because they go together. You could also say about prioritising and time management, because again they go together. So they should marry up. So that's a little bit more about the personal profile. And that goes for the next section too, which is on your skills and competencies. So a lot of the advice on how to put a personal profile together go hand in hand with the key skills and competencies. Don't just make the mistake that every other candidate does and just list loads of words. Good communication, good planning and organising, good project management. You need to back it up. You need to tell the person how you've applied it. If you're analytical, what sort of information are you analysing? Is it complex financial data, for example? Are you collating lots of information to report to managers to make decisions about? You need to back it up so that the person reading your CV has a very, very clear idea of your skills and how you've applied them. This is upping your game. Like I said, if you just complete the bare minimum of information on a template, it's not enough. You're going to look like every other candidate. Using the tips and techniques that I'm sharing today, you'll up your game. Now they can get a really good feel about what you've done in the workplace, and you're much more likely and increase your chances of getting invited to a job, because that's all a CV is doing, is getting you that invite to sit in front of someone and demonstrate you are the right person for the job. So we've talked about contact details, we've talked about personal profile, we've talked about the key skills and competencies. Now, just another couple of things on the key skills and competencies. If you are going to list them, you might get away with some of the technical ability to just put the minimum. And what I mean is, okay, so say, for example, I have good UK employment law. So I might get away with that, but someone would want to know, what sort of knowledge do you have? I'm not a lawyer, so I might describe working knowledge of the elements of the basic elements of UK employment law. Or if I was describing my system skill, I might say basic, intermediate, or advanced. But again, anything you put on your CV, you must be able to back up. You must be ready to be tested and assessed in the interview. If you've put anything, it's fair game if you put it on your CV, because someone's going to ask you the question. Particularly a meticulous HR manager will go through everything with a fine-tooth comb and quiz you on that information that you've put on your CV. It is incredibly awkward in an interview if you've said something and it's not the truth. It's very awkward at interview, I'll tell you that much. It's happened quite a few times, and I'm just as embarrassed as the person sitting there that has claimed they're analytical and they're not. So I hope that gives you enough information. That's in the order of probably how you would put it on your CV, and that's got to be on the first page really, and there's got to be a theme and a thread through those that shouts out time and time again, this is what I do, this is my experience, this is my skills, this is my qualifications, and it all threads through the personal profile, career summary, and the key skills. So we're coming on to the fourth section now. This is the career history, and this is the bit that I'm going to leave some of it for next week because it's just a huge subject. Now there's two kinds of commonly used CV formats. So there's the reverse chronological, that's the most common. You'll see that a lot. A reverse chronological and a functional CV. The reverse chronological is exactly what it says on the tin. It's your current job first and then your career history going back. So ideally your most current job should be on the first page. Now I have given advice, and this is as a last resort, I have said to candidates, if you're really struggling with how to write your career history, look at your job description. But copying and pasting the job description really isn't enough today. The list of tasks and duties don't shout about you adding value. Now think about it. Every single job, every single vacancy, whatever it is solving a problem the employer has. They have a problem and they're hiring someone to come in and fix that problem. Whether that's we need to generate more revenue, so we'll hire someone in sales. If we've got a high turnover of staff and then we've got a problem with our recruitment, we hire a recruiter. If you have a person with personal care needs, we're going to recruit a carer with the skills and the experience to be able to provide. The person's not a problem. The actual service is a problem, and they're hiring someone to solve that problem. So they need to look at your CV and go, okay, this person fits the job, they want to do it, they've got the background, they've got the skills, and they fit the business that we're in. And that should shout throughout the CV that you fit in with the job and the company and the values of the company. And that's where your SWOT analysis last week comes in, because part of that was opportunities and threats, and that was your research on the company. We'll talk about that in another session as well. So you've got your reverse chronological format and you've got your functional, and I'll tell you the two uses. Reverse chronological is the most commonly used CV format, and that's mainly used for people that have the experience. So for example, I've worked in recruitment for 15 years, so I would use a reverse chronological because the last 15 years and the work that I've done is all the experiences that match that job. If you're going into say I was to move into teaching, I don't have the experience in teaching, but I can demonstrate some transferable skills. So I would probably use a functional CV to demonstrate some of the things that I've done in the workplace, like training workshops, coaching, and educating senior managers. I would transfer that over and put it into a functional CV. So that it looked like, okay, she can actually do this job. She's not got teaching experience, but she's got the skills and the competencies to match that job. So that's how I would use those two different formats. There is a different way. Like I said, if you just cut and paste from your job description, that's not enough. But if you include achievements on your CV, now that is a big subject, and we're going to talk about that next week. You have to have achievements to stand out from all the others, because that will demonstrate that you have been of value to that employer. So really big, important subject. It's also not just for your CV, it's actually in preparation for the interview. So that's why I'm going to address that particular topic next week when we've got a bit more time. So that's what you need to put on your CV as well. So think about some achievements, and that's what analysis would have helped you to think about the questions you need to ask. The fifth section is on it's education and qualifications. You can put those together if you like. And again, we're not going to spend too much time on this, but on your master copy you might have a page full of training courses, education, in-house workshops that you've attended, and again, you wouldn't, if you were tailoring your CV, you wouldn't include all of the things that you've ever trained. For example, I used to work in the health sector, the care sector, and there was a whole load of training that we did for that. I wouldn't put it on my CV because it's not really relevant anymore. So qualifications should be listed in the highest grade first. So if you have a master's, that should be the first one listed, then a degree, then a diploma, then a certificate, and then any other qualifications you have under that. Like I said, you can put all of these onto your master CV, because I always tell people this, you can't tailor a CV from scratch. You have to have the master CV and then you can tailor it. So the master CV would have everything on, it's captured everything, all your training courses, and then you'd move over only the relevant ones when you were applying for a particular job. I think that's enough on that section. We're going to move on to the last sections now, so I'm going to wrap up after this. The last section can be 3 different options for you. So for those of you in public sector, you're likely to have had awards and recognitions. So you need to detail those. And if you're moving into the private sector, you might actually want to explain in a little detail what level they are, because private sector aren't used to awards and recognition, and they might only be relevant internally, but I know some of the awards and recognitions are really quite high profile in the public sector, and they need to be detailed because they're really important that you have that on your CV. They really shout volumes of the kind of achievements that you've had in the workplace. It also demonstrates your continuous professional development, and that's really important. If you've been in the public sector, you're likely to have been in there for 10, maybe even 20 years. I've worked with people that have been in the public sector for 30 years plus, and they've still putting a CV together. That's quite difficult after 30 years to try and remember what you've done, and keep it onto 2 pages. Then the other option is professional membership. You might want to include that as well. It's really important, and if you're a lawyer, an accountant, or work in HR, they all have professional bodies, and you don't actually have to have a separate section. You can put that in your personal profile. You might want to shout that on the first page, or your key skills and competencies. That might be something you thread through those particular sections. And then the last one, the other option, if you have absolutely no work experience at all, and you're struggling to even create a whole page of information because you're just out of school or college or university, you can include hobbies and interests. Now, there are a lot of mixed opinions about hobbies and interests. Some managers really want to see what the person is like outside of work, that you're a rounded person. They want to see that you've got some interest out of work. It's quite healthy to have that balance. But if you have no work experience, you might want to go out and get some voluntary work or work in the community, or you might be involved in some sporting activities. All those are really good to put on there because it shows that you have some interest outside of work. Just one more point, if you are a graduate and you are coming out of university, you might actually want to put your education and qualifications higher up on the page. So you might have your contact details, your personal profile, then you might want to put your qualifications and education and then key skills. Because again, if you don't have any work experience or it's very limited, you might want to shout more about your qualifications. And again, if you're struggling to fill up a page, because it should be at least a page, then you might want to outline what modules were involved in that particular qualification, so people know what you've covered, what knowledge you have to bring. So I've managed to get a lot of tips and suggestions out there to up your game with the CV. Lots of things there, and I value your feedback. If you have any feedback, please let me know. If you want the handouts, again, please let me know. I'm going to upload this to YouTube, so you can pause and take notes, because I've thrown so much information at you. And I'm just wondering if there's anything else I need to cover. Well, actually, just a few general points. These might sound obvious and a bit common sense, but I think I need to say them, actually. So it needs to be really easy to read. There's going to be lots of different readers. There's going to be readers that skim read. There are